Well, we are in the midst of Holy Week, not only for Christians, but it's also a very significant week for those of the Jewish faith because Passover, it begins on Friday.
Yeah, and we are joined by Rabbi Mason-Barkin. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to meet you. And first off, explain to the people what Passover means to the Jewish faith.
Beautiful. So Passover is, beginning Friday night, as you said, Passover is a time for us to think about the escape from our narrow places, escaping from oppression. And this takes us back to the biblical story of the Israelites escaping from Egypt. And we are supposed to feel as if we too were slaves in Egypt. And what's the best way to connect yourself to an old story or to feel as if you experienced something that maybe happened thousands and thousands of years ago is through all of our five senses. And so at a Passover Seder, we experience the story through tastes and touch and smells of all of these different items that represent different parts of the Passover story.
And everything has very significant meanings. So kind of go through for us, if you would, Rabbi, what each of the meanings are for the different foods that we see here.
Absolutely. And we've got a lot here. So we've got, this is a shank bone, which is a bone from a lamb that represents the blood that was put on the doors of the ancient Israelites when Pharaoh put out the decree to kill all of the firstborn children, so that the when God put out the decree to kill the Egyptian children. And so this way God would know which were the Israelite homes and pass over those homes.
Yes.
This is parsley, or karpas is what we call it, and it represents springtime and greens, but we dip it into salt water, which represents the tears of the Israelites, the pain of that experience. This is chazeret. We use celery for this, which is kind of a cross between the springtime and the bitter herb. But if you really want to experience the bitter herb, this is horseradish. This is a straight up horseradish root, which I don't know if you just want to smell that. You could taste it if you want, but it's pretty intense.
So at the Seder, do you eat this direct, or you just add it into some? Oh, you eat it direct.
We eat, well, I always take a little.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty strong.
And before the things that we eat before eating them, we say a blessing over them to remember what it's for. This is a roasted egg, which symbolizes rebirth, springtime, new life, and it also brings up the remembrance of an ancient sacrifice in the temple for certain festive holy days. And this is charoset, which is a mixture of apples, sweet red wine, cinnamon, nuts. It's very delicious, but what it represents is not so delicious. It represents the mortar that was used to build the pyramids when the Israelites were slaves in Egypt. And of course here, iconic, we have matzah, which represents the way that the Israelites had to flee Egypt without even time for the bread to rise. So it's unleavened bread, and this is just regular matzah, but now you can get it in all kinds of flavors. You can get it gluten-free, you can get whole wheat, but this is just the real stuff.
Of course, 2019, right? We got to make it bigger and better.
The gluten-free is actually real tasty.
I like that. So when you get together at sundown on Friday night, is this the meal that you have in celebration with all your friends and family?
This is just the lead up.
Okay.
So these books here, these are called Haggadot, and they are books that take us through the experience of telling the story of Passover through all of these items. And so the things that we eat and bless, we do those. We acknowledge some of the items that we don't eat, like the shank bone. We'll just remember what that is about, kind of point to it, maybe look at it. We'll taste the things like the parsley and the charotza and the matzah, and then we eat.
Then we have the big feast.
Yeah, the celebration, and then get to the real stuff.
Exactly.
Now, I have to tell you, before we started this, I was kind of joking. Well, I've seen the movie The Ten Commandments with Charlton Heston, and actually it's a really good way to understand what Passover is all
I can
about.
definitely teach about the story.
Rabbi, thank you for sharing with us. We really appreciate you spending some time with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And happy Passover.
Oh, thanks so much.
We'll be